Well, howdy, Pastor Mark Driscoll here. Thanks for joining us. We've got the special Real Leaders kind of Veterans Day episode. A couple of soldiers, chaplain. Maybe you guys introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, so Mark, thank you for the honor of being here.
Yeah, and it was good to have your family at church, and your kids
Yes.
got to go down the water slides. And
We picked a great week to come, your birthday party, the
Yeah.
sixth birthday party, so that was amazing. Ryan Pearse, I'm a chaplain in the Army. Both of us are stationed at Yuma Proving Grounds, which is like 3 hours from here. I started out enlisted. I was Private Pearse for a little bit, and then eventually became an officer, and then eventually a chaplain. So that's
how do you do that? How do you move up the ranks and get into a because it basically means you're a pastor on
Yes.
the base doing what pastors do.
Yeah. So the three big things: education, experience, endorsement. Those are the 3 E's. To become a chaplain, some people think, well, hey, just sign this piece of paper. I want to become a chaplain. It's a little bit more complicated than that. So I've never had a break in service. I've always at least been in the National Guard. So
So how many years serving?
I have served for 20 years.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't look that old,
Thank
brother.
you. I appreciate that. No, I am that old. I've been serving for 20 years, but not all of it has been active duty. National Guard, if you're familiar with National Guard or Reserve. Yeah. So I drilled 1 weekend a month, and then I was able to be a full-time seminary student and a full-time pastor. And those are, you got to have education.
Okay.
You got to have experience, full-time pastoral civilian experience, and then you have to be endorsed. So, for example, I'm endorsed by the North American Mission Board.
Okay.
You have to have an endorsement.
Some overseeing
Yes.
body that,
Yeah.
So in addition, though, to Christian, what else are some of the religious lanes, spiritual lanes? It's gotten a little broader in the military.
Yeah.
I mean, not everybody who is a chaplain is like thumbs up Team Jesus.
Correct.
Who all can make it as a chaplain? What are the religions that are represented?
The biggest, denomination or whatever, it would be considered Protestant. Okay, so you have Christians, you have Protestant, and of course we wear a cross, and so this is a Christian chaplain. Now, even within Protestantism, that's a mixed bag, and so there's a lot of different religions, or a lot of different denominations, even within that. But then the other ones, you have Muslim chaplains, you have Catholic chaplains, which Catholic chaplains wear a cross, and then you would have Buddhist chaplains. Now, those are considered minority chaplains.
Yeah.
There are not very many of them. The biggest majority of the chaplains are Christian, and I would say mainline Protestant Christians. There are some.
So like Lutherans, Methodists, Presbyterians would kind of be the lion's share?
Yes, yeah. Now there's some that fall outside of what I would consider mainline and mainline Orthodox. They wear a cross, but they probably don't really believe all the things that I would believe. So you look at him, you say, oh, there's a cross, he's a Christian chaplain, but we chaplains know who's endorsed by who.
Yeah.
So, like if I'm serving at a chapel with other chaplains, generally speaking, I agree with all of them on the major issues.
So they'd be like the evangelical group?
Yes, exactly, yeah.
And so for those who may not be familiar, what's a chaplain do on base? What's that ministry like?
Yeah. Well, one big thing is, Sunday morning. Of course,
You have service on base?
We have service on base. Of course, we have to pour ourselves into Sunday morning, but there's so much more than just Sunday morning. Sunday morning is a small slice of what we do. Monday through Friday, we are, we're there for all the soldiers and family members and any DA civilians, Department of Army civilians. So we're staff officers, and so, there's a lot that goes into being a staff officer. We're also counselors.
So you've got marriages, you got
Yes.
pre-marrieds, you got couples getting married, you got people getting pregnant out of wedlock,
Yep.
You've got all the usual stuff that everybody deals with. You've got conflict within the marriage, family, miscarriages, have
Yes.
kids, parenting, and then you're doing the funerals,
Yes.
and then you're walking with the widows and orphans.
Yes.
What's that like?
The 3 biggest, and this is straight out of the Army chaplain textbook, the 3 biggest core competencies of the chaplain corps are nurture the living, care for the wounded, and honor the fallen. Now, what we do most is nurture the living. You hope you never have to do the other two, but sometimes you do. You have to care for the wounded, and then, God forbid, you have to honor the fallen. And that is, time-wise, that's the least of what we do. But when
Emotionally?
when we have to do it,
You're there with the widow and the kids?
yes, it is the most important thing, and you cannot mess that part up. So if there is someone who dies, maybe it's a soldier in combat, maybe it's a soldier in training, maybe it's a soldier in a car accident, or family members. Yeah, you got to be there, and there's memorial ceremonies, and there's counseling, and everything. Your world stops, and you focus on that.
But so you're dealing with a lot of trauma.
Yes.
And then with deployments, you've got families that are in need and in crisis, and dad, usually it's dad is gone. What happens to a family? Dad goes off, dies in combat, women and children, we're living on the base, we're part of the community. What happens to that family then?
So, yeah, great question. The Army takes care of them for a certain amount of time, but eventually and of course there's life insurance, and there's, all the funeral arrangements are taken care of and everything like that. But eventually they go back to wherever they're from.
So they leave their community of support, fellow soldiers and families that understand.
Yes.
And so for them, you lose, let's say in this case, it's dad, tragically, and then pack up and move and leave where you've lived and all the people you've done life with and all those emotional support relationships that got you through or with you through the trauma and the crisis, and then you start over somewhere else.
My recommendation for families like that, especially when it's time to transition from the Army back to wherever they're from, they got to get plugged into their local church, because everything you just mentioned, the Army's there for them on a number of different levels, not just with the chaplain corps, their chain of command, their friends, their neighbors. If they live on post, I'm sure they have a great, family readiness group and neighbors, and they all come together. It's a big deal. But what happens, like what you just asked, when they go back, they got to get plugged in back home with their family, their friends, and particularly their local church. And then you just hope that they have a good local church wherever they're going to that is able to help them. Because if a few months goes by, you just lost your spouse. I mean, a few months, you're still hurting.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So,
and you're still raising kids and
Yeah.
answering their questions and all of the process of grief. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so even for those that are pastors or leaders that are watching, it convicts me, like there should be somebody appointed at the church, and we need to do this at Trinity where I pastor. So thanks for sharing. And that is, somebody who knows that this is their designated ministry, is to welcome families that are either relocating or they're through trauma and crisis, that somebody's raising their hand and say, we're here and we're here for you, and you're going to be at the front of the line as a priority.
Yeah.
Rather than just showing up and hoping it works out.
Yeah. And anyone can do that. But I would say probably, if you're going to have people lead that ministry.
Oh, they have to be former military or current. Yeah.
It definitely helps. Just even if it's like, hey, I was in the Army Reserves for a few years, way more than someone who wasn't in at all. And so just to be able to speak that language and to understand, because the Army, it's a different language.
Yeah.
Like when you start talking, there's acronyms and there's things that you start saying. So yeah, find your prior service people who have a heart for that. And those are the people that you want to be able to take care of, the other prior service people. So.
Very cool. So introduce yourself. You're on the soldier side, and we'll pick up the story with you, buddy.
All right. My name's I'm Sergeant Brannon Schieman, so I'm on the enlisted side. I have wife.
So
3
he'd
children.
be your pastor?
Yeah, he's the chaplain of my base. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's actually with the conversation. That's how we got introduced. So I just lost my grandmother. So I was sent to him from my leadership to have a conversation and everything. So he helped me.
Somebody
through
to
a
pray
lot.
with, somebody to walk with.
So it's sorry, that's a side note, but it's like that's how we got introduced in the first place, was he was helping me and guiding me through my family loss this year.
And then coaching you a little bit, probably how to deal with family and funeral and
traveling and
traveling and all of that. So, okay. So tell us a little bit about your story. And then you've got the craziest, You've got the craziest job. I don't know if they did rock, paper, scissors and you lost or what happened, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, it's life decisions. So I'm a parachute rigger at the Airborne Task Force.
So explain, you guys are down at Yuma. Maybe explain for folks, the Yuma base is a little unusual.
Very much.
It's not about as much having as many soldiers, but you do some very specific testing there.
Yeah, we're the main kind of test for the Army. So they test their desert vehicles and stuff like that. So what I'm part of is the airborne side of it. So parachutes, dropping heavy equipment.
You're the parachute tester?
Yes. Parachute tester. Yeah.
Well, congratulations. You're still here. I mean, that's crazy. So when they have new flight gear, they want to see if it works or not. They give it to you, and then you...
Yeah.
The mannequin first, and then he's second. Yes.
Yeah, okay. That's crazy,
the
bud.
second crash test dummy. Yeah.
So give us some examples of what does that job look like? I mean, we can't get Americans to go to work, and they're at a furniture store sitting at the front desk greeting people, and most Americans are like, that's too much. And you're like, I'll try the parachute, drop me out of the plane.
Yeah. So we have a lot of different equipment. So a lot of stuff we'll test stuff for like a Fort Bragg. That's where our main command is out of. So it's, if they're testing a new radio, but they got to make sure it can handle a parachute drop, landing, and everything like that. So they'll give it to us. We'll put on. That was one of the tests I was a part of. It's the same parachutes. They didn't mess with the parachute this time.
That's good.
But it was radio strapped to us. Then it was seeing how they fit, put the parachute on, go jump out of an airplane when they land. Then they make sure everything works after it. We did more recently like some sights for it's like snipers and things like that. We jump with them. They go shoot them after, just make sure they still work. So we're just give equipment to us. We jump out of airplanes. If it survives, it goes to the big Army, and that's pretty much my entire job.
Have you had? I mean, of course, I got to ask this question. Have you had anything that didn't work?
Occasionally, yeah. With some of the sites and stuff like that, they would always have one that somebody like I'm a heavier airborne guy. So if I land on something wrong or something, I come down faster than the 120-pound guy. And so every once in a while, something will break, some equipment will go down.
That's fun. How long have you been doing that for?
So I've been on almost 6 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing it. I mean, you see the gear and then you forget, like, somebody had to see if that gear was going to work. So thanks for being that guy. So what is it like for you as a Christian living on base with your family? For most that are hearing this, they're living civilian life. They don't understand Christian life on base as a Christian.
It's been interesting. Like since I joined, because my first 3 years I was in Germany.
Okay.
So it was I think they had a chapel on one of the bases, but they didn't have one on the base that I was directly associated with. So we were finding churches and that kind of thing. Then now being here, we have the chapel on base. We have obviously nearby. That's how we got introduced because hey, you're going through something. Go talk to him, and so it's nice to know it's nearby. My wife knows that. She's got everybody's numbers, everybody's stuff.
Yeah. So explain the relationships between the families. I'm guessing they're probably more intertwined and deeper level of relationship than the typical church that people are a part of, because you're kind of living together and doing life and deployment together.
So at my short time at YPG, Yuma Proving Ground, only been there for a couple months, but when it's the summer, it's hard to get out and meet people. It's just so stinking hot. But when it cools down, everyone's outside. It's like a little Mayberry. Everyone's outside, everyone's meeting. And even at larger bases, you got neighborhoods, and there's shared commonalities. You just know that the neighbors next to you are pretty much going through the same thing, and they're all speaking the same language. They're all usually walking in life together. They got kids that are generally the same age. I mean, even our kids are generally the same age. So YPG, Yuma Proving Ground, is just kind of a small version of what you would get at bigger Army posts. But yeah, I mean, families really come together, and of course there's sometimes, there's drama and whatnot, but families come together, and especially at YPG, me being the only chaplain there, I really would like to see the community come together, especially around the chapel, preferably, and around Jesus and around Christ. So to build that up, to build the community up, and kind of have the chapel be the center point of that. That's really my goal and my prayer that that's what will happen at YPG once it cools off,
Yeah. Yeah. For those of you that aren't in Arizona, Yuma, June, July, and August,
It's bad.
it's the beast, the false prophet, the Antichrist. I mean, it's just hell on earth.
And
It's
as hot as
unbelievable.
it is here in Phoenix, it's even hotter in
I know.
Yuma. So
I know. So let me let me ask you that, being on base, part of the ministry in the chapel, what does that look like for your family? Is that Bible studies? Is that Sunday morning? Is that kids ministry? Compared to the average person who's going to a typical church off base, how is it similar and dissimilar for you and your family?
So it's actually just changed. Like you said, he's just come in for the past couple months, and now we're just kind of getting that up swinging now. Like we've talked about Bible studies and this and that. Like, so different weeknights, and because I work Monday through Thursday, so it's a different kind of work schedule depending on what we got and like my family schedule. So with everything kind of spinning up now, where we have Bible studies throughout the week, we're honestly just getting started.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a church plant.
it is like a church plant. Now, not always. I mean, sometimes you get there, you hit the ground running. There's, if you're on a larger base, there's multiple chaplains there, and you're just kind of, fall right in. At YPG, I'm kind of, it is kind of like a church plant. So we're just now kicking off a bunch of ministries like Brannon was saying, Bible studies, things for ladies, things for men.
Marital stuff, parenting stuff.
Marital stuff. We're going to do some date nights. We're going to do some spiritual fitness luncheons, things like that. So a lot of things are coming through. And this is just, to serve the community. And my focus is mostly on families.
Mm-hmm.
When I look around, especially in the neighborhoods, the small community where people live at YPG, I see a lot of families. I see a lot of kids, and I know kids, you got to have kids programs. So we're kicking off a bunch of kids programs. And, it seems like everything's okay, but I know that there's issues, there's marital problems, and it's no different than civilians would go through, but there's unique challenges that, military families
Totally.
And military, marriages have.
Well, because for most families, so you get married, then you and your spouse decide, where are we going to live?
Mm-hmm.
Where are we going to work? What's our schedule going to be? Where will our kids go to school? You join the military. My guess is you don't get to make a lot of decisions. Somebody else gets to make all of those decisions. So you may end up at a place that wasn't your first choice. You may end up in a community that wasn't your first pick. A lot of decisions are made for you. Mm-hmm. And that probably leads to a lot of tension in the marriage, because the one spouse is saying, hey, I didn't sign up for all of this, and now someone else is making all the major decisions for our family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's usually one, and it could be the service member and it could be the spouse, but one of them is usually more disgruntled than the other. And of course, when you're not on the same sheet of music, that's a problem. I love doing marital counseling. I mean, I don't like doing marital counseling if I don't have to, but I do love doing marital counseling if necessary, because I hate to see marriages fail.
So let me ask you that. Do you know off the top of your head, if you don't, that's fine, but like statistically, divorce rate, dissolution of marriage for those who are active military versus civilian, I'm assuming, in everything I've ever read, that number is much higher.
Yeah, it's slightly higher. I don't think it's much higher. I don't have, updated numbers, but there is a divorce problem across America.
Oh, yeah.
And the military is just a snapshot of America. There are certain communities within the military that have higher divorce rates than others because of what they do. But generally speaking, the Army's divorce rate is only slightly higher, actually, than the outside world. But anytime there's a divorce, I mean, it's heartbreaking, especially when you know that it's preventable, and usually it is preventable. But yeah, I mean, to do marital counseling and to be able to hopefully help them and bring them together that's rewarding. That's a good part of my job.
Well, I'm guessing on the base too, premarital has got to be a huge thing. You've got a bunch of young guys that are single, and if they pick the wrong gal, it could be a lot of pain.
I don't do nearly enough premarital counseling, because they don't. They
don't ask.
I can't force
they have
people.
A few drinks, go to Vegas, and then ask you to fix it.
I can't. That's kind of. Unfortunately, that's kind of how it is, and I'll see them later. Within the first year, there's so many marital counselings that I've done within the first year. Even people, like I've been stationed somewhere for 3 years once. I've known this guy for, close to 3 years. I said, how long have you been married? Oh, we've only been married 6 months. I said, man, I've known you for 18 months. When did you meet, your wife? Oh, I met her 7 months ago. I said, where were you 7 months ago? Why are you coming to see me now? Why didn't you come see me? And then I would have people come to me and say, can you marry us? And I said,
that's a fire, aim, ready. Like you guys were taught how to do things. This isn't it.
Can you marry us? And I said, okay, hold up. I got a couple questions for you. So I start asking questions and I say, hey, listen, what you're wanting is not a chaplain. What you're wanting is a justice of the peace. That's what you want. I said, I can give you the number to the justice of the peace, but if you want me to marry you, this is what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And some of them say, okay. And some of them are like, no, never mind. I said, okay. I mean, I can't control you, but if you're going to, you've known her for 2 months or whatever, this is not statistically speaking. I hope it works out for you, but statistically speaking, this is not good. This is not good. So if I marry anyone, I, of course, require premarital counseling.
That's awesome.
As a chaplain, and I tell them this, I said, I am under no compulsion. I do not have to marry you. I can marry you, but I can also say no. I don't have to marry anyone. So, I don't do enough I wish I would do more premarital counseling.
Well, let's circle back around to that because there's some great resources through XO, Marriage Today, some great, I don't know if you're familiar with SIMBA, Saving Your Marriage Before It Starts from the Pearse. There's all these different resources that can be super helpful. For you, as, military family, for those that are going to, a lot of pastors listen to this, a lot of church leaders listen to this. Family shows up at church that's a military family, maybe active or having completed their assigned time. What's going to be most helpful to welcome, to serve the military families, somewhat different than even some of the civilian families? What would be most helpful for you and your family walking into a church right now?
As far as like a military chapel and everything goes?
Well, just you guys right now. Just church in general. Like you guys, let's say you and your family next weekend are like, we're going to look for a local church to get plugged into. Yeah. You show up. What's going to be most helpful for you and your family?
I think a big issue with military, especially because we'll, like you said, not during the summer, but during the winter months when it's summertime everywhere else, is knowing that you're not the only Christian on base. Like you'll sit there and have a conversation with somebody for an hour at a park that your kids are playing, and then they, it happens to come up and they go, "Oh, you're a Christian too." It's nobody knows, or they're not loud enough about it. Mm-hmm. So I think when you go into a chapel or a church and you see military, and you go, "Oh man, you're on the same base I am." Like, well, knowing that you're not the only Christian there, you're not the only one walking that.
Community support,
Absolutely. I think that's a big thing is the community. Like knowing.
What does your wife need walking into a church?
Break for my kids, probably. I try to provide that every now and again.
So programming where mom can get maybe women's ministry, get with the gals, prayer, adult conversation, somebody watch the kids.
Yeah, that's one thing we discussed about the child care, so mom can get in there and listen. We have 8-month-old.
How old are your kids?
So I have an 8-month-old. My son is going to be 3 in 10 days, and then my daughter will be 5 in December.
Okay,
so 4, 2, and 8 months.
Ours were every 2 years. We didn't have a chart, but that's how it showed up.
Exactly.
And so what would help these guys then would be even things like date night.
Oh yeah.
Watch the kids and give mom and dad a break. Maybe give them a little homework to work on the marriage. Some of those. So a lot of it's going to be marriage and parenting and.
Yeah, I think one of the main, we discussed this just the other day, but one of the main issues is time away. Like I said, your dad got deployed for 18 months, comes back. So when I left for basic, sorry, just a little side story about myself. I left for basic in March 27th of 2017. I joined later in life. I'd been married for 2 years, but with basic, airborne school, my job training, and then I got shipped to Germany.
Wow.
The first duty station, hey, you're going to Germany. So I got sent straight there.
You left your family behind?
Yeah.
Holy
So
smokes.
because my wife she was pregnant. She was too far along to fly. So I had to go to Germany. I was there for 30 days, had to hop on a flight. We were just telling a story yesterday. I was on a C-17, which is not really heated, for 18 hours in the middle of winter in December to fly back to the States just to make it for my daughter's birth.
Wow.
And so went there, was able to see her born, everything went smooth and great. Was with her for 7 days, and I had to fly back to Germany because a bunch of paperwork has to be
Holy
done.
smokes.
So I didn't see my daughter again until she was 5 months, end of April. So, and then by the time I'm living with my wife again, it's been over a year, and now we have a baby. So, married for 2 years, away over a year, start over.
So she's dealing with pregnancy, birth, postpartum, depression.
Yeah.
She's living like a single mom. So if there's not support for her, her life is really complicated and difficult. Not to mention the two, being separated. Just you take any married couple and just say, hey, don't eat or sleep together for an indefinite period of time. It's probably not going to improve the marriage.
Exactly.
And if you don't know Jesus, you're probably not going to make a lot of good decisions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a strong community of support for the wife is one of the best things you can do for the soldier.
Absolutely.
And then loving, supporting the kids and giving mom a break.
Yeah, nice little vacation every once in a while.
A little bonus round.
Yeah.
So what would it look like for you to be able to start to offer date nights on base for the couples and the military families? What would that take? So if you're a chaplain, I've got a church, I've got a ministry, people can give gifts, they can do things. How does that work for those who say, okay, I love the chaplains, I love Jesus, I love soldiers, how can I help the chaplain do what God's called him to do for the families on the base?
For nice things cost money. So I guess money. When you're talking about a date night, I've done many date nights, and the Army has money. The Army has certain pots of money that allows you to pay for a dinner for the couples. Mm-hmm. And we have some there at YPG, and we're going to, I intend to turn none of it away. I intend to have...
It's the only government money I'm actually really excited about. If we can give date night to soldiers, families, that's the one thing I think we can actually get a decent vote for.
Thank you for paying your taxes. Just know that
don't
some
thank
of
me.
it...
They don't give me a freaking choice, brother. I'll tell you that right now.
So it's not all wasted. And I'm like, I'm not turning any of this away. I'm not trying to save any money. I am trying to execute dollars, and for these different requirements, what we call requirements in the funding world. And this is a requirement. If you want your community to be spiritually fit, and I do, and I say, commanders ultimately are in charge, we got to pony up. We got to pony up. But then
here's your new life verse, Ecclesiastes 10:19. Food is good for the stomach. Wine makes life merry, but money is the answer for everything. And
I love Ecclesiastes. Yes, and
so do you have a budget to I'm just going to ask a bunch of stupid civilian questions.
No, come on.
So do you have a good stack of good Bibles to be able to give people to read God's word, or do you need a stack of Bibles?
Well, so
do you got money for date night? Do you have a sound system? Where do you meet for chapel?
Yes.
Open the kimono, brother.
Okay.
What do you got?
All right, man. Here we go. You should not have asked me all this. This is all on my mind because we're about ready to get in.
You're just getting started.
I'm just getting started, and this is being filmed in September, which means FY23 is October 1st. So all of this is fresh in my mind. We, of course, have a building. It's a chapel. You can't miss it. It's got a steeple on top.
Chairs, sound system, stage, the usual.
We need some help in that regard. Most chapels that I've been into, the sound system and the lighting and all that stuff could definitely use some upgrades. That is hard. It's hard to spend money on that because for good stuff, you got to pay money, and you can.
I know.
Yes. I figure you did.
If it plugs in, just add a zero.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you can only spend certain things with certain pots of money.
Yeah.
So there are certain things that like it's easier to purchase, and then there are certain things like sound systems that's harder to purchase. But I can do date nights, and I do have some money for that. If I had unlimited budget, I'd do a date night. And actually, what I think is even more valuable is not the date night, but overnight retreats. There is something that can be said.
Would you like to go away with your wife for a night and no
Absolutely.
kids?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Wouldn't have to pray about that. We just,
Yeah.
2 or 3 witnesses, man. We landed there quick. Yeah.
And even if the kids come
Yeah.
during some of the weekend, it's good to have childcare.
So could we sponsor through RealFaith a soldiers' wives weekend away? We find a way to have the kids watched and get mom and dad a break. Could we
Yes.
sponsor that and make that
Yes,
happen?
absolutely.
Then we'll do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Those
So-
are the kind of things I think I would encourage local pastors, ministry leaders, business leaders. How do they find their local chaplain to figure out what these needs are so they can help? Because I think for most people, they're like, thank you for your service. We love you. We appreciate you. We're grateful for you. We are sorry the way the world is trending and it's against, faith, freedom, and family. How can we help? But they don't know where to go.
Yeah.
So how would they find the chaplain at their local base?
If they live next to a local base,
Yeah, if it's in their city or their state.
drive on there, find the steeple, go walk in. Now
You can do that?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. If
Because
you
nobody wants to get shot. I mean, we don't know. So,
So I used to work at Fort Meade, and Fort Meade is best known for the NSA. You don't want to go on there, okay? But if you try and go through the gate at the NSA, the National Security Agency, that's a problem. But most bases, you can go on, or at least go to the visitor center, get a pass. Go to the chapel. Google is your friend. You can Google Maps it. You can find the chapel.
and email the guy. Where would you find a chaplain digitally?
So Google, for example, Yuma Proving Ground Chapel. My office number will come up. You call it till someone answers, and there you go. You could do that. I forget the Air Force Base that's right outside of Phoenix here, or Tucson. You could do that for the Air Force Base here. A few hours away is Fort Huachuca, just, I guess, southeast of Phoenix. That's kind of a bigger military, certainly bigger than YPG. You could Google Fort Huachuca Chapel and then find the number, call them, and then just engage that way. Chaplains, I don't know very many chaplains that would turn that away. And if someone did, I would say, let me talk to the other chaplain.
Yeah.
Because I mean that's ridiculous. I mean, I certainly would never turn it away. But it's really simple. I mean, like, we want to get away. We want to get away. And I've done marriage retreats when I've had the money for it, and sometimes the money's there and sometimes it's not. I try and go as far away as possible. If you say, hey, we're going to meet down the road at this hotel, that's not good enough. You want to get away. There's something that can
You
be.
guys want to come to Scottsdale?
That from Yuma, there's nothing in Yuma, so
No,
yes,
bro.
we.
No, if I have date night in Scottsdale or Yuma, dude,
Yeah.
I'm going to Scottsdale. So what I'm hearing is, on a lot of bases, there are Christian chaplains who love Jesus. They've got the equivalent of a church or a church plant and a ministry with families and all the usual things that a pastor deals with. They could be partnered with if a local church or business leader said, "Hey, we're gonna support you."
Yep.
And almost every church or ministry has got a missions budget. And I guess what I'm encouraging is, like, find that local base, find that local chaplain. If they love Jesus, then they're doing very important missions work. They're reaching and serving people for Christ who are in complicated variables and a closed community that would otherwise be a little more difficult to minister to.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm assuming, if the local church or business leader or ministry is just willing to be the supply line and then let the chaplain and his team be the front line,
Yep.
it doesn't sound like there's much of a supply line built.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy. I mean, an overnight event or a weekend event.
So let me ask you this. We'll just do this on camera since the whole world's watching. So, so you're a smaller base compared to many. So if we did, and it wouldn't have to just be Christians, anybody would be welcome, make an evangelistic event. How many couples do you think you would be able to get? Was there a couple hundred families on base?
There's a couple hundred uniformed soldiers.
Okay.
Most of them are married. There's a lot of civilians. We would focus on the uniformed soldiers. And when you're at Yuma, and you're given the opportunity, for a marriage retreat, there's a high percentage of turnout. So yeah.
So let's do this then, and I would encourage other pastors and ministry leaders. I didn't know this is where we'd end up, but it's where we ended up, which is great. So Grace and I, my wife, we do a weekly marriage podcast, Real Marriage, and we've got another marriage book coming out here in January. And why don't we do this? Why don't we put together a time, January, February, somewhere between New Year's and Valentine's Day, somewhere in there where the weather's really nice. Let's partner it between Real Marriage. I'm sure my friends at XO and Marriage Today would be about this as well. Trinity Church will be involved as well. And let's put together an event, an overnight or a weekend or whatever, for soldiers and their families in Scottsdale.
Yeah.
And then I've got the church there with the kids ministry, and so we could get creative with that, but we could provide some programming and break for mom and dad, and we could put this all together. We'll pick up the tab for all of that, make sure everybody gets a good Bible. And I want to come down to, we'll come down to the base. I'm going to make a visit here shortly, see what you guys are doing, see what you need. But we want to just be supportive and helpful. And thank you for all that you're doing. And then I would encourage, especially since this is going to air around Veterans Day, for other Christians and pastors and leaders, just try and figure out where's the guy who loves Jesus and has the authority to do ministry, and how do you help that guy and his family do ministry?
Yeah. No, that would be amazing. And we would have an amazing turnout. Getting away from Yuma, getting to Scottsdale, there's only upside to that.
Yeah.
And then, but as far as Bibles are concerned, so I love handing out Bibles. I think what's even better is handing out study Bibles.
ESV study Bibles.
Yes.
That's what we give away at Trinity.
So those, of course, a Bible is great, but to be able to give them a study Bible.
Something significant.
Yes.
Leather cover, Cal gave its life. It's important.
Yeah.
So my whole life changed. I was in high school. Pastor's daughter gave me a really nice leather-bound Bible with my name on it. I got saved reading it in college. And part of the reason I kept it and kept picking it up was it seemed like this is very significant. This is a big gift. This must be important.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I remember many years ago, my dad had a leather-bound Bible, study Bible, and I took it and I was reading it, and I don't know, a few days or a couple weeks went by, whatever, and I was like, Dad, I'm not giving this back. He goes, that's okay.
Yeah.
It's yours. I'll go buy another one. So that's a great memory. And just to, ESV Study Bible, that's a great
It's an incredible resource.
Start.
It's an incredible resource.
Of course, there's
tons of options.
There's tons of options, but that is a great start. And when you give someone an ESV Study Bible, that's a big deal, especially if they take it and say, look at this, I'm unpacking God's word in a way that maybe I hadn't before. By myself, not listening to someone else, but in my own study time, this is helpful. And to watch them grow from that, it's big.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's do this. We'll talk offline. I'll come visit you guys down at the base. Can I go in the wind tunnel?
If you want, yeah.
I don't know if I want. Do I want to go in the...
That's fine, yeah.
Okay. If I can do the wind tunnel, then we'll trade you wind tunnel for a marriage event. And so then, we would love to get you study Bibles, and then we will plan the retreat and event for soldiers and families and wives. If it's January, February, we have a new marriage book coming out. Grace and I can give it to them. It's out of the Song of Solomon. It focuses on sex. If you want us to come talk about sex, I'm willing to. I'll see if Grace would.
As long as the kids are in childcare,
you don't want to
go.
That's how I got here. Now I need trauma therapy. Yeah.
And I've led marriage retreats before, and one of the comments was, you need to talk about sex. You need to talk. And there's a lot of people who are struggling in that
I'm all
area.
about helping.
Okay, there you go.
I'm here to serve, brother.
There you go.
Yeah.
You'll bear that cross.
Yeah, I will, man. I will. Somebody's got to do that ministry,
Yes,
and so I'm
yes.
volunteering.
It is important because, a lot of people don't talk about it and you think you're okay, and a lot of people are not okay. And why are we not enjoying sex like we should?
Well, especially the pressures of military and deployment. They've got all kinds of complicated decisions to make, like when we're deployed, what do we do? What do we not do? I mean, you've got, not to turn this into the NC-17 Real Leaders podcast, but if I didn't see my wife for a year, at some point you got to talk about like, well, we're not doing what we want to do, so
Yeah.
what are we going to do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, at YPG, fortunately, they're not deploying.
They're just jumping out of airplanes.
Perfectly good airplanes.
Yeah, with,
Helicopters on
1.0 gear.
Yeah. So there's plenty of time to have babies. I mean, that hospital in Yuma is busy, but still, there's a lot of dysfunction when it comes to that. And usually it is, and also I've noticed this when I've done counseling before, especially with younger soldiers, but even older soldiers, you start asking them questions, and it's like, when I was 16, when I was 14, when I was 12, and I'm like, man.
There's abuse, there's trauma, there's addiction, there's everything.
There's so much, and a lot, sometimes it's overwhelming, like, oh man, I don't know if I'm qualified to talk about this. I mean, like, that happened when you were 12, and man, so whether it was sexual or not, there's a lot that happens in people's past. But even if it's not sexual, to bring baggage into a marriage unresolved for years and years and years, there's something wrong.
Yeah, well, and with your military requirements, and then you start adding kids, you can get so busy that you're not dealing with issues.
Yeah.
And then the pressure comes, and then there's a crisis. So, well, it'd be an honor to do what we can to support what you are doing. I would encourage those who have joined us, find your local base, find your local chaplain. If they're an evangelical that loves Jesus, try to figure out, how do we help? How do we support? What do you need? What can we do to help? And if you're a pastor, I mean, this seems like a simple, very significant way to say we're doing missions all over the world. Most churches are contributing to missions. Are we overlooking the people, maybe even in our own community, that are defending all of our religious freedom
Yes.
to preach the gospel of Jesus? Shouldn't we make sure we don't look over them to the nations, but we should look through them first because they're defending the nation?
Yeah.
So thank you guys for your time. Anything else we could be praying for you or your families about?
I don't know. Yeah, just
Safe landings, right?
safe,
Good gear?
Yeah.
good gear, safe landings. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, love you guys. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your service, and I look forward to seeing you on the base. And we'll put the rest of this together. And thank you for everybody at RealFaith and Trinity Church who are generous. I didn't know we were going to end up here, but if that's what the need is, hey, we'll do it, man. That sounds good to me.
Pastor Mark, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
love you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.